You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. Good morning and welcome. We'll be kicking off today's edition of News and Views with a story that is very, very important because it hits every South African where it matters the most. Well, the pocket. Today, Finance Minister Inequality is set to table what many are calling Budget 3.0, the third attempt at getting national spending plans over the line in a deeply divided political landscape. And with no VAT hike, something that I think all of us appreciate, rising debt and a ballooning budget deficit. This time, all eyes are on where the axe will fall, the proverbial axe will fall. Where will those budget cuts be? And most importantly, who will it affect the most? There are talks that, medical aid taxes, credits and fuel levies, and also bracket creep that are quietly draining paychecks. It's clear that the pain is coming, and ordinary South Africans may once again be forced to shoulder the burden. And to help us unpack the politics, the policy, and the human cost of this austerity-driven budget, we are joined now by a good friend of the show, Thokozile Madonko, a researcher at the Public Economy Project at the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at Wits University. Thokozile, always great to have you with us. Welcome to the show. Really appreciate it. When I see your face, I know something big is going to be happening when it comes to the financial front of our country.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. And thank you so much for having me. I always appreciate the conversation.
The pleasure's all ours. Thokozile, as we head into Budget 3.0, what stands out to you about the political and economic context in which this budget is being tabled? And most importantly, how different do you think it is going to be from the first two failed attempts by Finance Minister Inequality?
So there are two big things that we need to keep in mind around Budget 3.0. The first is that the global economy, particularly around the trade wars, the tariffs that have been happening, the kind of what's been going on in the US, that has had a ripple effect and is affecting the markets globally. And so South Africa, as a small open economy, we've been hit by that as well. Also, the IMF has just done a reforecast on growth globally, and they've sort of said that they think South Africa's growth forecasts have been too optimistic to date, and that actually we're hovering around 1%, with others saying maybe 1.5% growth of GDP. So, the fundamentals that shaped the first non-budget and Budget 2.0 have shifted. And so essentially Budget 3.0 needs to be a very new budget. The second area is that hopefully the politics in the budget making process, we've learned a few lessons, and that it's been growing pains of the GNU to be able to understand and engage in the budgeting process. Some have argued that the budget has been weaponized by the Democratic Alliance in particular to try and get other concessions outside of the budget process. And so we're hoping, at least I'm hoping, that there's been a bit of maturity, the adults are now in the room, and they're able to agree at least on a budget for 2025. That's what we need right now. We don't need to be caught up in discussions about 2026 and 2027, because we can have those conversations in October when the medium-term budget policy statement is tabled. What we need right now is a budget to take us forward for this financial year.
Thokozile, I want to focus now on the nitty-gritties of this budget. We've heard a lot about the government being boxed in, that tax hike, lack of appetite, and the lack of borrowing room, essentially, and the talks of deep cuts that are looming and that are coming. Is this a case of austerity by necessity or by design?
So this is a case of austerity by design. This is a policy priority that the National Treasury announced in 2012 with full vigor and vim, that we would be following fiscal consolidation and pursuing a primary budget surplus. So we want to be able to show that we have buffers in the system. The problem has been that since 2012, the global environment has shifted enormously. Our structural supply side issues have reared their head in terms of electricity problems, energy problems, rail and port and so forth. Water now is becoming increasingly problematic. So we actually need a very different fiscal policy in order to address our economic and social needs in the country. We need essentially a growth-led budget. And at the moment, that just hasn't been penciled in. And so I'm deeply concerned. If you were to ask me what's keeping me up at night, is hearing these stories that there's going to be severe cuts to make up this shortfall that the VAT was supposed to plug. The reality is that this is a crisis of the Treasury's making. There are resources of revenue available to them to be able to not cut into social services in particular. There's also various reforms that could happen across government that could find savings that would enable us to have a smooth, leaner, meaner state that's capable of being able to deliver services. So we need to avoid unnecessary cuts and protect social spending. And it's clear from the rumor mill that this seems to be something that the trade-off is that we're going to see social cuts to education, health, social development. I mean, we cannot cut defense any further. That would just, then we need to have a conversation about, do we even need a defense force if we're not going to fund a defense force, for example? These are big questions that need to happen at a policy and political level. But in terms of the options available to Treasury, there were a number that were proposed by the IEJ, the Alternative Information Development Center. A number of organizations have put forward options, and we could have looked at, again, the JFECRA option that we looked at last year to raise necessary resources. We could introduce an ultra wealth tax, so looking at the ultra wealthy, or raising CIT just back up to 28% because it was dropped. Corporate income tax was dropped by 1 percentage point. They could just move that back up to, because there hasn't been any evidence that drop stimulated the economy in any shape, way, or form, except for giving the big corporations a tax break. And we need that money. That money is needed to be able to deliver and to ensure that we have resources available, in particular for our infrastructure build, because that's where jobs lie. So when we talk about infrastructure, I want to point out that from a feminist economics perspective, we don't just talk about roads and rail and water infrastructure. We're talking or big power stations. We're also talking about social infrastructure and human capital. So investing in education and health, investing in clinics and hospitals, that all stimulates. It creates jobs in terms of building the buildings or maintaining the buildings, but also a number of auxiliary industries and activities blossom in the wake of that kind of stimulus. And so it's kind of a lack of imagination. So this austerity path that we're pursuing is really quite a lack of imagination for what is needed from a rights-based perspective and a constitutional-based perspective for South Africans and what they need in their pocket.
No, definitely. I want us to go for a short break, but then when we come back, I think I want to, continue with the theme of what you say keeps you awake at night. Those cuts that you talk about. There's talk about a 60 billion that is expected when it comes to spending cuts, and I want us to expand a bit from that, and the fact that how this might actually deepen existing inequalities in South Africa, looking at who is going to be affecting the most. But we'll touch on that a bit after this short break.
This is Salam Media.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Operation Kurbani Maulana Timor will once again be taking a trip abroad for Kurbani. Many people in the villages live well below the poverty line and only eat meat on the days of Eid al-Adha. Support this cause at 2,100 Rand for 7 shares or 300 Rand per share. Contact Maulana Timor, Maulana Sajjad, Maulana Hamad or Maulana Abbad on 011 852 6324 or 072 299 9268 or 082 368 6866 or 072 697 0131 or 073 576 9786. All slaughtering will be supervised by a team of foreign and local ulama. Visit www.operationkurbani.org.za.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, yet many children go to school hungry because of poverty. Penny Appeal South Africa's Breakfast Club aims to get a warm, hearty meal to underprivileged children so they can spend their day prospering in their schoolwork. Help feed a needy learner for only 5 Rand a day or 150 Rand a month. Or visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573 to find out how you can donate. Penny Appeal South Africa. Small change, big difference.
Abu Huraira narrated that he heard the Prophet Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, say, "In black seed there is a healing for every disease except death." Experience the health benefits of this ancient blessed seed by using the Tib Black Seed range. Black seed assists the body to boost immunity, regulate blood sugar levels, reduce inflammation, and act as a potent antioxidant. Experience a holistic approach to health by introducing the Tib Black Seed range into your routine. Available in capsules, pure cold-pressed oil, and a vapor rub. Trust Tib Health Sciences for quality black seed products. For more information, visit blackseed.co.za. Available at leading pharmacies.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views right here on Salam Media with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. We just come back from a break and we're still having a really insightful conversation with Thokozile Madonko from the Southern Center for Inequality Studies at Wits University. And we've been unpacking what Budget 3.0 could mean for ordinary South Africans. And I want to turn the attention now to Thokozile. Thank you so much for staying with us to what's arguably the harshest headline, of this budget. That's 60 billion in expected spending cuts. From what you are seeing, your analysis and your research, and considering what we've seen in previous rounds of austerity, who is likely to feel the brunt of these cuts the most, and how might this deepen the already stark inequalities in South Africa?
So it's important to know that when you cut social services, you're essentially cutting what we call the care economy. So it's all the services that provide care that the state provides, which is health, education, social protection, and the grant system as well falls under that. But within social protection, we have a number of, drug and related support systems, social workers, and so forth. So social development plays an important role in also providing auxiliary support to dealing with poverty, inequality, and social ills. And one of the biggest issues that we see is when you cut back on these services, you're basically pushing care back onto the family. And who in the family does most of the caring? It is women and girls. And so it exacerbates gender inequalities, and in some respects also exacerbates, because you have an economy that's not flourishing, you have services that are dwindling and diminishing, people are not employed, and so you have higher levels of violence and higher levels of gender-based violence. And so women become the shock absorbers of a reduced state in terms of the caring sector. And so care work and time poverty. So women become time poor and young girls become time poor. And what do I mean by that? Essentially, they don't have time to be able to go to school necessarily, or to be able to be active in the labor market, and because they have to be at home looking after the younger ones in the family, or looking after the sick in the family, the elderly in the family. Or we also have a situation in South Africa where a lot of older persons are looking after younger children. And so that then also makes, for older people, again, time poor for older women at a time when they should be resting and relaxing, but they're actually playing the role of parent because the parents have to go out and work. And so when you have good social structures and social systems in place, provided by public provision of public goods, such as education, health, and public transport also becomes a big part. We often don't talk enough about the role of public transport, because in South Africa, we have some of the longest commute times in the world. People spend a lot of time in public transport getting from A to B to get to work, because of the nature and the legacy of apartheid and the apartheid geographical structures of our cities and towns. So it is really concerning that we don't have a gender responsive budget. Even though a gender statement was tabled, we're seeing that this is not a gender responsive budget. What we want to see is a sound, equitable, developmental budget that really focuses on developing everyone in South Africa and making sure we're providing the resources to both men and women and boys and girls to be able to access a decent life.
Very, very important point that you're making there, Thokozile. I want to focus on something that I think is very, very important. I think there was much jubilation, when that VAT hike, no VAT hike announcement was made, and it looks like it's going to be the case in Budget 3.0. But doesn't that mean we're bound to see a more silent shift to more hidden, or what one might consider stealth taxes? Just looking at how there's no adjustment of tax brackets and credits for inflation also. What does this mean essentially for low and middle class income earners here in South Africa?
Absolutely, you're correct. So what happens is, in fact, the VAT was a stealth tax. It is very harmful for poor to low and middle income households. Some would argue that no, it wasn't so bad in the South African context because we have a social wage, we have grants, as well as the zero rating. I'm not of that opinion. I think it is a very regressive and is basically letting the ultra rich off the hook. So we're basically saying we're not going to tax people, the billionaires, but we're going to tax the poor and working class and middle class in South Africa. When it comes to bracket creep or the personal income tax brackets, what we have argued and many have argued is that we do need to have some inflationary allowance in the lower bands of the brackets to make it progressive. And then to make sure that you then tax appropriately the higher the brackets. And research by the Alternative Information Development Center has shown that since 1994, the top brackets, actually, if you're in a top bracket, you're actually paying less tax effectively now in 2025 than you were in 1994. And so we need a reform of our entire tax system. And this is what has been useful about the VAT debate, is that it's drawn attention to revenue. So how government raises its resources for funding projects and programs and services. So the reality is that we should be saying tax the ultra rich, because when we say tax the rich, people go, but I want to be rich and I don't necessarily want to be taxed. We're talking people with millions of multi-millionaires and billionaires that could be paying their fair share. And then we want to say, make sure that personal income tax is progressive so that the lower bands are protected from inflation and the higher bands pay because they can as a proportion of their income. And then we also want to see corporate income tax, as I mentioned, go back up. It used to be high in the 50s and 60s. Now it's dropped right down to 27%, where it used to hover much higher, around 32%. So we've made some decisions in our tax mix that have resulted in the low and middle classes, and the introduction of VAT in and of itself is now bearing the burden of the tax regime. So don't let anybody tell you that we have a narrow tax band in this country. We don't, because the majority of South Africans pay VAT, and VAT is carrying a heavier load of the tax burden in South Africa over the years now compared to corporate income tax. And when we compare it to corporate income tax or personal income tax, so it's critical that we need to be taxed. Tax is good. I pay my taxes. I'm happy to pay my taxes because I know that I want to be able to walk out and have my road pothole filled. I want services. I want public services. I want to make sure that somebody gets into public transport that is safe, reliable, and gets them from A to B. I want electricity, energy. I want water flowing in my taps. That's the purpose of tax. It is a collective duty to be able to make sure that we are able to support the services to ourselves and to others. But what it should be is fair. And at the moment, we do not have a fair tax mix, and that needs to be addressed.
No, definitely. I want to focus, I think, on a very, very important aspect, and still sticking with the theme of taxes. Medical aid tax credits and NHI. Medical aid tax credits, there's little rumors that they may also be on the chopping block. Government has long said that these need to go to help fund the NHI. But if the credits are reduced or phased out, who wins and who loses? And is there any kind of clarity on how this ties into real health system reforms?
So this is a highly contentious issue, and it's contentious for various reasons, because the tax rebate on medical aids is essentially for the middle class and wealthy South Africans. Only wealthy South Africans have medical aid, and only they are the one. And then when I say wealthy, because we have such obscene inequality in South Africa, I have medical aid, so I get that tax rebate. So I appreciate it when I receive it. The reality is that I could probably do without it, because I would much rather have that money going into the National Revenue Fund to be able to fund good quality public health services. I would like to not have a medical aid in the long run. I would like to be able to access good, free, a national health service that provides services. But that's, some people would say I'm dreaming. That's not the reality of South Africa. So at the moment, these tax credits play an important role, particularly for single women on medical aids, because it helps them to balance their budgets in the year. So there are some pros and cons to doing away with the tax credits, but it is a huge amount of money, and it would easily have plugged the 2.3 billion that was missing from the VAT this financial year. Now, remember, when you throw around the 75 billion or the 60 billion that's been thrown around, that's over the 3 years. What we need to focus in on is what do we need for this financial year, and let's get to October to talk about the outer years and discuss what our broader policy arrangements are going forward. But for now, we need a budget for 2025. So the tax credit question is up for grabs, and it is a complex issue, and it is contentious. And I have to be honest that I don't quite know what my position is on it, other than knowing that It is the bulk of of people who can afford medical aid who benefit from it. And so taking it away is taking away something that perhaps those are households that could afford it. But I'm saying that bearing in mind that single-headed households, poorer households really do value that credit every year. So it's complicated.
No, definitely. Just in closing, Thokozile, we have unfortunately run out of time. Your parting shot for ordinary South Africans listening right now, worried about what this budget means for their petrol tanks, their paychecks, or clinic visits. What should they be watching for today as Minister Inequality tables, or that makes a third attempt at tabling a budget?
Essentially, right now, as South Africa, we need a budget. We cannot function without a budget. It doesn't make for good public services. It doesn't make for confidence in the markets. And so what I would really want us all to do when he tables the speech and tables the budget review is to see if we have finally received some kind of compromise budget that can get us through 2025, that can get us to October so we can have a robust engagement in the medium-term budget policy statement, so we don't have a repeat of this year's budget debacle for 2026. So let's just get a budget going for 2025. That's what we should be asking for.
There you have it. That was Thokozile Madonko from the Southern Center for Inequality Studies, helping us make sense of what this third national budget could really mean for the average South African. You and I, Thokozile, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. And hope we'll catch up again as we make sense of what the Minister of Finance might have tabled for South Africans.
Yeah, thank you so much.
There we go. Yeah. What do you think? We want to hear from you now. What do you think of budget 3.0? I think most importantly, what do you think of these spending cuts and some of the tax adjustment proposals that have been put to place? Are they necessary to balance the books, or are they just deepening the divide between the haves and the have-nots? You can send us your voice notes or messages on our various social media platforms. I'm seeing comments already coming from our YouTube channel. Abdul Chabalala saying if we had a well-maintained industrial base, jobs, and wide-reaching public transit, ideally also nationalized mining, we wouldn't have these budget shortages. He'll continue to say, us working masses will yet again be feeling the brunt of these cuts as expected under any austerity measures. We should force our politicians to live in Alexandra's shanty towns, Hillbrow, Berea, crowded tower blocks, and make them take the bus to work with the rest of us working class so the country is fixed. And I totally agree with you, Abdul. I think one thing about our politicians is there's a sense of them being out of touch with reality, and that's concerning for me. I mean, the mere proposal of a VAT hike from the previous attempted budget tabling was a concern for me. I mean, so many South Africans are unemployed. Those of which are employed, are also, struggling with the cost of living, struggling with the amount of taxes that are already in place, because, well, everything is now privatized, largely because of the failures of the same government. We have privatized security, we privatized healthcare with medical aids, we privatized education. So all of that now compounded by the fact that you have to pay extra tax for these things because of failures of the same government which can't deliver them for you. So it'll be interesting. We're going to be broadcasting that budget by Minister Inequality later on in the day. So keep your eyes and ears peeled onto Salam Media, and we'll be giving you the latest on that front. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we head over to the subcontinent of India, where Islamophobia has once again reared its ugly head, and thousands and thousands of Muslims are being displaced and are being targeted by the Indian government. We'll be touching on that after this short break.